Hello everybody, welcome back to Making Records with Eric Valentine. That's me. We are back to our regularly scheduled program here. I took a hard left down Fairchild Street. That was interesting, but I'm happy to be back doing the normal stuff here. So this one is called The End of the Rainbow, because I'd gotten to a place where I felt like this control room is sounding great. It feels great. I was pretty much, I knew that it was going to work at that point. But there's still some things that needed to be finished. There was a door that still hadn't been installed yet. And so there's a door to the machine room that's on the other side of this wall. And that hadn't been installed yet. And it's not airtight between this room and the machine room. So air does pass through these racks. They're not totally sealed up. And so there's the possibility that when that door went in and gets closed, it could change things, definitely change the air volume of the room. I hadn't totally finalized my work surface situation. So I did that literally yesterday and today. I was drilling and cutting and sanding and doing stuff, made some custom things and got everything exactly where I want it. It really made a beautiful difference, so I can show you all that. And so I was finally able to let's just completely finish this, because at this point the next thing I have to do is have this room not look like some sort of weird giant Tootsie Roll nightmare, and have it actually look like not an insane person put it together. So and once I do that, it will be way harder to make changes. So I really wanted to do one final check to make sure that I'm ready to button all this up, make it look pretty, and just, move into just recording stuff. So, so this was that round, and I wanted to jump in and do an episode now, because there's definitely a little bit of a shift in, where I ended up with this. And I just want to make sure that everybody hears this part of it. If you've been listening to these and they've inspired you to whatever, go after any of the stuff that I've been experimenting with here, this is this is an important final sort of assessment of the whole experience, now that I'm really at the end of it. And so really what it boils down to is that I did all this stuff. This time I was determined. This time it's to not have to rely so much on the tube traps for this round. And so I went down this whole crazy path with the VPR panels. They're all over the ceilings. Those are the ones that I bought. I made ones that went on the walls. I did some testing that made it really look like, okay, these things are really, really effective. They're really doing stuff. This should get me there. And I really wanted it to be that, to just put those VPR panels on the walls, have it be great, just touch up the low end a little bit, maybe with some Helmholtz resonators and whatnots, and here I go. That's not what happened. So that's not where I ended up. And so the reality is, at this point, here's sort of the punchline, is I can't get away from these tube traps. They really are, at least for me, they seem to be the most effective, the best sort of bang for your buck, and the most kind of dummy proof, I really spent a lot of time screwing around with all these other things, the limp mass absorbers and Helmholtz resonators and all these bass management things. I did the active things. I forget the name of the company that made those. A couple people had asked about those. I did try those. Not even close, I put them in the corners in the back of the room. They didn't do anything, at least not in my room, Yeah, I would have loved for those to work. They're super expensive, but if I didn't have to go through all this, man, just put one of those around the room and save me all this time. Great, I would have done it in a second, but didn't get me there, And so that was where I ended up, And now I'm kind of wondering, with all hindsight, 100% hindsight, I'm really wondering if the VPR panels really needed to be on the walls, you can see in the back, the ones in the back are all covered up with tubes now, you know, and I could have done tubes on the sidewalls, you know, and it may have ended up in a better place, you know, and when I'm going to grab this, I'm just going to pull the camera off the stand and turn it around, and you'll see what happened on the front side of the room, but it is a fucking tuberama up there. It's insane. And so, you know, I've put a tube in every square inch I could possibly squeeze one in the front of the room, and it makes a huge difference. So let's look at what happened here, okay? So I'm going to go back to the graph I got of this room when there were no tubes in the room. It was just the VPR panels in this room. So here it is. Here is that graph. And there's some big problems, really big problems. This was this pesky, enormous 50 hertz cancellation that I was chasing forever. Here's another one just above 100, and here's another one just above 200. And we can ignore this up here. That's just because I didn't have the microphone perfectly positioned between the two speakers. I was only concerned with the low end here. And so then it's just been this insane journey. And, you know, it's interesting as you're, you know, adding tubes, there would be times where I'd add a tube and one of the things that I was really trying to address would get worse. And it's because this is so complex, you know, that there's a cancellation happening between frequencies that are colliding at different timings. And when you're dealing with frequencies canceling because they have some degree of opposite phasing, then you could change the level of one of those colliding frequencies in a way that causes, even though it's absorbing that information, it causes it to cancel more because it's bringing it closer to the null point. I talked about that before. So it can get really confusing as you're adding stuff. And so this time around, I just was like, I just forged ahead. It's like there are times I put up a tube, looks worse. I'm just going to keep adding more tubes and see what happens. And so, and I added them everywhere. And it also appeared like, if I added a tube to one side, it seemed like you needed to do it somewhat symmetrically. And so I'd add it to one side, and then one of the issues could get worse. And then if I added to the other side, then it would kind of balance out, and then you would see more of the benefit of it. So maybe that has something to do with it. So I just kept going. Just keep adding tubes, you know, in this motherfucker, and just see where it ends up. And the tubes are really not, you know, wildly expensive. You know, in this last round, I bought an additional 11 tubes. There are 2 different sizes in there. 8 of them were 12 inches for the outside diameter, and 3 of them were 16 inches for the outside diameter. Is that right? Yeah, 16 inches. And so they all have 2-inch walls. And so all of those tubes, 11 tubes, was about $500, you know. It's really not that bad, you know. And the way I'm using them right now, I close them up, glue the seam, and leave the paper on there for now. Ultimately, I'll cover them with fabric and stuff, and just put them up, you know. And I've seen other people go through all this crazy stuff trying to make these things do, I don't know, be more efficient or not or whatever. I experimented with a bunch of that stuff, putting caps on them, not having caps on them, with the paper, without the paper, you know, all of this stuff. So some like putting these like vented inserts, all kinds of stuff in there. And they work great just as you buy them off the shelf. At least my experience, you don't have to do any crazy extra engineering with these things to get the benefit. You need a lot of them for sure, but I think it would be the same even with all of these extra, you know, tweaks that are done with them. I don't imagine they're going to get somehow profoundly more efficient with some of these other things that have been added. Maybe they do, but so far, all the experimentation that I've tried, not a huge difference, not at all. You can have the paper off, paper on, cap one side, the other side, cap them both, no cap, whatever. They work in just about every form. So, you know, I stuffed as many in here as I could. I also had to figure out, like, you know, how I'm going to be able to actually hang these things, which was tricky because now the ceilings are all covered with VPR panel. Okay, you know, bunch of stuff. So here we are. This is where I was with no tubes in there, and now I'm going to go All the way back. Okay, we got to do that just so you can see how insane this actually has been. How many times I have graphed this damn room to try and figure this out. I'm just going to let it just kind of speed down here. It almost looks like an animated thing. There's a certain point where it starts to not be able to advance anymore. You can see places where things are getting better, getting worse, sort of trading one thing for another. And then there's a spot where I think the sample rate increased, and so it's not able to just, oh no, it made it all the way. Okay. Yeah, so that's I don't even know how many are in there. It's like hundreds of rounds of me graphing this room, experimenting, trying stuff, and then ultimately like playing, doing the final tweak with EQ. So what we landed on here, this is the last thing I just captured minutes ago. And so this is the room with the tubes. So the tubes, well, that's not true. It's not just tube traps. The tube traps got me from there, you know, that's the difference, you know. And so I ended up here. Huge improvement on this 50 hertz thing. And the 50 hertz thing, I did end up getting some Helmholtz stuff to work for that. I talked about that before. I expanded on that. So I found another place where I could add another one of these Helmholtz tubes up in the ceiling that helped with this. So now, the grand total at the end of all this is 3 Helmholtz resonators up in the ceiling that really did help with this quite a bit. And then the rest of it was all just tubes to get me here, you know, all the way from there. You know, these are problems that I cannot address with just EQ. I can't, you know, it would be a disaster if I was trying to fix this stuff with EQ. And so I did still have this 200 hertz thing fucking with me, but you know, I ended up in a place where I'm just going to address this with EQ and get there. And so here, this is with the EQ. Boom. That is the final thing. I'm committing to it. It really sounds incredible. So you can see the difference. So I did a pretty substantial move here to address this with EQ. Didn't have to do so much, you know, in the 50 hertz now. And it didn't do anything there. That just is, you know, I think that's sort of close enough. And ultimately, if you look at this thing, I started doing, you know, an array, simulating an array. And so we can check that out. And the whole thing looks, you know, not as severe. So let me switch this to average. Boom, like that. And so there it is, all averaged out. So that, you know, this is my main listening position there. But when you see it averaged out, you know, the 200 hertz thing isn't really that big of a deal. And I think there is some, you know, and towards the end of the process, I do reference this just to see if any of my EQ moves are actually too much, you know, because the microphone can't hear this the way your ears do. Our ears are directional, and the microphone is not in the way that our ears are. Like, my ears can tell what sounds are coming from this speaker and what sounds are coming from that speaker, whereas the microphone can't. They're both, you know, all of that information is just colliding into this single point and sort of interacting and phasing and canceling and doing all this crazy stuff to, you know, give you this graph. But I don't believe that that's how my brain ultimately perceives the sound. It's a good guide to sort of get to a good place, and it does seem to make sense, you know, ultimately with what I want to feel when I turn the speakers up. But this graph is not necessarily exactly how it's perceived by your ears, you know. And I think the average probably is a little closer to how it actually is perceived by your ears. So that's the final thing right there. I'm sticking with it. You know, I love me a little extra low end. So that's been pretty much common in all of the room tunings that I've done. I always have to have this. It's just not fun to listen in here if I don't have that. So I do. Unfortunately, the Strausses have so much headroom in the low end that it stays super tight, and you get this amazing, satisfying low end out of those speakers, man. It is really, really fun in here at this point. So I think this is a good time. I'm going to grab the camera off the stand and pick it up so you can see what happened on the front side of this room, man. It is complete lunacy. So here we go. Let me grab this thing. Okay, here we go. So there's the back of the room. We're going to take it back. And then I'm going to turn it around. Holy tubes. That is a lot of tubes. I put them up on the ceiling. I put them all over the place. Boom, 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 boom. Everywhere, all over the place. Okay, I'm gonna switch cameras here. Okay, so, and the room is just a complete wreck because I've just been going crazy in here trying to figure this shit out. Okay, so as you can see, I ended up putting tubes on the floor even. It's crazy. I'm sure there's, people think I'm a crazy person. I don't care. Like I don't really go up here that much. There's a few compressors and stuff. It's easy for me to navigate around them. And it was definitely an important part of getting this right. On the ceiling, it ended up being this row of these tubes right down the middle that seemed to be the most beneficial. When I was adding stuff on either side, the results were pretty erratic, and I was able to get closer to where I needed to be with just those. And as you can see, it's just the raw tubes. There's no end caps. You can see where I was experimenting with end caps. I taped one on there. I put one on there. I'd put it up and measure it. Didn't change anything. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. If it doesn't change the frequency response in the room, I don't care. So this is where I ended up. And this was the other last thing that I did, was my work surface. And so this thing, this is the one that I built in Topanga, and I brought it out here, and I needed to convert it over to hold the SPL, because in Topanga, I was using one of these it was a JBL passive monitor mixer that didn't have as much functionality as this one. And so I switched to this. I love this SPL thing. It's got some really smart features. Sounds great. Sounds invisible, just like what I want. And so I had to make this hole bigger in order to fit this thing in there. I wanted it to be flush mounted. Before, I had it just sitting on top, and that made it so I had to have the screen higher as well. And so this was the last tweak that I did, was getting this to be more recessed in there. And you can see, like, I've got the little charge cable for my whatever Magic Keyboard thing, and so this allowed me to get the screen down too, and that was definitely fucking with me. Let's see, I can give an example of that. So here's just the one thing by itself, the final main. We'll have to go back to compare mode. And so there was a spot back here. So this is an earlier grab, and you can just see how there's more stuff going on, more cancellations and comb filtering going on up here, and I really believe it was from the screen. And so as soon as I lowered the screen and changed the angle of it, it went from this and having this stuff going on to that. Much smoother up there. And it was audible when I would sit here, and it made it so I had to sit higher for the speakers. And so with it down lower, it sounded better, when I was closer up, and I don't have to be elevated so much. It's just not interfering with the speakers as much. And the sound of it is more like, it's a weird thing, it blurs the stereo image a little bit, like when my head was sort of down behind the screen, all of a sudden the real, like, you know, crystal clear definition in the stereo imaging that these speakers are capable of would start to get blurred a little bit, and you'd hear some of that ringy comb filtering and stuff. And so, you know, so I finally got this right. I can get this thing down. I built this stand for the monitor, just one that was just the perfect height for it. They're outside working on finishing the decks. This is the Angelique wood that's going in for the deck, so I was able to just grab some scraps from that and use it to make the stand for that thing. Finished that today, and man, it's sweet. It's finally like, I think I'm really there. I'm really ready to do it. I haven't hung these from the ceiling yet, and the tubes are ready to do it. They're glued together, and there is a cap on the top, so I have a way to hang it. And so there's a little hook that goes in, you know, right in the top of that thing, and then I can use a little piece of wire. And I figured out that you can use like a sheet metal screw, and it'll tap itself into one of the perforations in the screen on the VPR panel for the roof or for the ceiling. And so I can just put a little screw up there and then have this this thing hang from the screen up there, because right now it's just propped up on the, on the RCA console. So I still have to hang those. I haven't done that yet, but these are hanging. You can see that they're, you know, there's a gap here, so they're just hanging from the ceiling. And ultimately, I'm going to shorten these a little bit. It shouldn't make a huge difference, you know, having this thing, whatever, maybe 20% shorter in the grand scheme of things. I don't think it'll change it too much. Just so this is a more usable work surface. I need this countertop space to be able to put guitar amp heads or whatever. And so then, let's see here. Let's go. So here's my world of the leftovers of me just screwing around with everything. A bunch of other stuff that I tried. So when I was experimenting with putting tubes in the front of the room, I also experimented with just stacking up, just making a big, huge stack of mineral wool, and I would just, you know, make a little box for it or something that I could put it in and see if that worked better. And so I had, you know, like a pile of mineral wool that was sitting right below the speaker that was probably, I don't know, maybe a couple feet thick, something like that. Yeah, maybe 1.5 feet, something like that. And so I had a bunch of that. Not as good as the tube. You know, it just didn't get as good of a result in flattening things out as the tubes. So I went back to the tubes. I also experimented with using some of the melamine foam and one of these panels. That one's sort of beat up, but there's another one around here that's in better shape than that. And so I put melamine foam on the floor, put a metal panel down, and then put more foam on top of it. See, hey, let's try this VPR thing in that position and see if it does something. Not as good as the tubes. And so here's one of the Helmholtz resonators that I was playing with. I ended up not needing. Yeah, there was one, I think there was a point where one of these Helmholtz things ended up, it probably went past a certain point. And so, because I had another Helmholtz thing there, and I ended up replacing it with just the soft tube trap. And that seemed to get a better result. Yeah, okay, this is kind of cool. You can see this is my test mic setup. So it's the Earthworks mic, and I have a little string tied to it, and it goes down to this drill bit, this hole cutting drill bit. And so I use this in order to make sure I get the microphone exactly in the same spot. And so I put a little mark right here. That's dead center. When that little drill bit pointer lines up with that little X, then I know I'm perfectly aligned between the two speakers, and I wouldn't get the cancellation in the high end like on this. You know, this is what happens when you're not perfectly matched in the middle. And so as long as I put it back to my mark, it will do this, and I'll see the high end accurately. Okay, I think that's everything. I just, you know, this episode was a little bit disorganized. I didn't really come up with a specific plan or an outline of stuff to talk about. I was just doing it, and so I felt like, you know, I'm just going to dive in and do this, and I wanted to do it quickly. I'm about to have to leave town again. I'm going to be gone for a while, and I wanted to get this out there. So in case anybody is in the midst of this process, I have a real answer, you know, for at least what's working for me. And it's still the tubes. I couldn't get away from them. I really tried this time. I really wanted to find another solution. And the tubes, you know, they just seem to work the best. You don't have to like tune them exactly perfectly to the exact right frequency in the exact right place in the room. Wherever you put them, they're more broadband. They're just absorbing a bunch of energy in the room, and just makes it really easy. If you just add a bunch of them in the room, your room will just flatten out and things will just get better, you know. And so, so there it is. I wanted to get that out there in case, you know, anybody is in the middle of this. This is where I ended up. If I had it all to do again, I probably would have skipped all the other stuff and just done the damn tubes, you know? So there you go. So hopefully something helpful or interesting in there. And I don't even know what the next episode is going to be. We'll see what comes up. There's definitely, you know, been more stuff going on and stuff to talk about. I'll figure it out and get something together I can put up there. All right. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. All right. Bye.